little short selection along the same lines from Naked Lunch. The laboratory's been locked for 3 hours solid. I think they're using it for an operating room. Nurse, I can't find her pulse, doctor. Dr. Benway looks around and picks up one of those rubber vacuum cups at the end of a stick they use to incise on the patient. Make an incision, Dr. Limp, he says to his appalled assistant. I'm going to massage the heart. Dr. Limp shrugs and begins the incision. Dr. Benway washes the suction cup by swishing it around in the toilet bowl. Nurse, shouldn't it be sterilized, doctor? Very likely, but there's no time. He sits on the suction cup like a cane seat, watching his assistant make the incision. You young squirts couldn't lance a pimple without an electric vibrating scalpel with automatic drain and suture. Soon we'll be operating by remote control on patients we never see. We'll be nothing but button pushers. All the skill is going out of surgery, all the know-how and make-do. Did I ever tell you about the time I performed an appendectomy with a rusty sardine can? And once I was caught short without instrument 1 and removed an uterine tumor with my teeth. That was in the upper effendi, and besides, the incision is ready, doctor. Dr. Benway forces the cup into the incision, works it up and down. Blood spurts all over the doctors, the nurse, and the wall. The cup makes a horrible sucking sound. I think she's gone, doctor. Dr. Benway. Well, it's all a day's work. He walks across the room to a medicine cabinet. Some fucking drug addict cussed my cocaine with Sandy Flush. Nurse, send the boy out to fill this RX on the double. Thank you.
As Esperanza turns to go inside, 6 pimpish young men burst through the door in a reek of brilliantine, lean over the balcony screaming insults at Joselito. This brings reinforcements to the faltering lower balcony. Tio Matti stalks out, followed by his adolescent Ca El Mono. Tio Matti is an old assassin with 12 deer on his gun. A thin, ghostly old man with eyes the color of a faded gray flannel shirt. He wears a black suit and a black Stetson. Under the coat, a single-action Smith & Wesson tip-up .44 with a 7-inch barrel is strapped to his lean flank. Tio Matti wants to put another deer on his gun before he dies. The expression a deer, un venado, derives from the mountainous districts of northern Mexico, where the body is usually brought into the police post, draped over a horse like a deer. The young district attorney just down from the capital, Tio Matti, has dropped by to give him a folklore lesson. Tio Matti rolling a cigarette. I'm going to send you a deer, Senor Abigado. The DA thinks, well, now, that's nice of him. Well, now, thank you very much, but it isn't too much trouble. Tio Matti lights the cigarette and blows out the smoke. No trouble at all, Senor Abigado. It is my pleasure. Tio Matti blows smoke from the muzzle of his .44 and smiles. Man is brought in draped over a saddle. The horse is led by a wooden-faced Indian cop. The DA comes out. The cop jerks his head back. Un venado. That's enough of that one. Let's see if there's anything else. And now Tia Maria, retired fat lady from a traveling carnival, comes out onto the lower balcony, supporting her vast weight on 2 canes. Tia Maria eats candy and reads love stories all day and gives card readings, the cards sticking and smudged with chocolate. She secretes a heavy sweetness. Sad and implacable, it flows out of her like a foam runway. The vecinos fear her sweetness, which they regard fatalistically as a natural hazard like earthquakes and volcanoes. The sugar of Mary, they call it. It could get loose one day and turn the city into a cake. Cut. Now Tio Gordo, the blind lottery ticket seller, rolls his immense bulk out onto the upper balcony, his wheelchair chariot, his snarling black dog at his side. The dog smells all the money Tio Gordo takes. A torn note brings an ominous growl. A counterfeit, and it will break the man's arm in its powerful jaws, brace its legs, and hold him for the police. The dog leaps to the balcony wall and hooks its paws over, barking, snarling, bristling eyes phosphorescent. Tia Maria gasps and the sugar runs out of her. She is terrified of rage dogs, as she calls them. The dog seems ready to leap down onto the lower balcony. Tio Mate plots the trajectory its body would. Tio Pepe throws his head back and howls. Pero atropellado para un camión. Pero atropellado para un camión. Dog run over by a truck. The dog drags its broken hindquarters in a dusty noon street. The dog slinks whimpering to Tio Gordo. Gonzales the Agente wakes up muttering Chingoa, the fumes of mescal burning in his brain. Buttoning on his police tunic and .45, he pushes roughly to the wall of the upper balcony. Gonzales is a broken, dishonored man. All the vecinos know he has much fear of Tio Mate and crosses the street to avoid him. El Mono has acted out both parts. Gonzales looks down, and there is Tio Mate waiting. The hairs stand up straight on Gonzales's head. Chincoa! He snatches out his .45 and fires twice. The bullets whistle past Tio Mate's head. Tio Mate smiles. In one smooth movement, he draws, aims, and fires. The heavy slug catches Gonzales in his open mouth, ranging up through the roof, blows a large tuft of erect hairs out the back of Gonzales's head. Gonzales folds across the balcony wall. The hairs go limp and hang down from his head. The balcony wall begins to sway like a horse. His .45 drops to the lower balcony and goes off. Shot breaks the camera. A frozen still of the two balconies tilted down at a 45-degree angle. Gonzales, still draped over the wall, sliding forward, the wheelchair halfway down the upper balcony, the dog slipping down on braced legs, the vecinos trying to climb up and slipping down. Give me the 16. The cameraman shoots wildly. Pimps scream by, teeth bare, eyes rolling. Esperanza sneers down at the Mexican earth. The fat lady drops straight down, her pink skirts billowing up around her. Tia Dolores sails down, her eyes winking sweet and evil like a doll. Dog falls across a gleaming empty sky. What Washington? What orders? Old Sarge. All right, you limey has-beens, I'm going to say it country simple. You've been taken over like a banana republic. Your royal family is nothing but a holograph picture projected by the CIA. What is its purpose? Well, what is the purpose of the Pope for you Catholics, good and bad, standing with John 23 like a good soldier in the presence of your captain? Any way you slice it, it's a grovel operation. The way we like to see them, I mean. What we are doing while the Pope and the other holies keep the marks paralyzed with grovel rays is one of the mysteries. You cannot understand the mercy of God. We don't intend to be here when this shithouse goes up. Maybe I'm talking too much about private things, family matters, you might say. And that's what we call the good old CIA, the family. When the prodigal son creeps back disillusioned from Peking, Information don't expel barbarian. Well, the family will forgive him if he is sincere on a lie detector. Well, we gotta take you back. The old ham fixes him with blue eyes like steel in sunlight. Just don't ever let us down again. From here to eternity, the old game of war. Where would the family be without it? So we can whittle off a little something to keep the royal family projected in Limey Land, can't we now? So the Queen needs more money? Well, call a story conference. Just how are we slanting this, BJ? BJ, doodling muscle boys. BJ, doodling muscle boys. Nothing new, just keep it going. They do need more money, otherwise they will go down in the same spiral as everybody else, and they wouldn't be the royal family anymore. Could wind up in a semi-detached in Darlington. They're supposed to be a supernatural family, religious figures, in fact, and the more potent in that they are not acknowledged as such. Just ask an upper-class English about the royal family and he gets all huffy and vague. It's not important. Who cares about Philip? Can't stand that chap Tony. But they want the royal family to continue as such. B.J. bulges a jockstrap. Well, yes, we are a monarchy. Excuse me. What about this $1 million a year? We're all together in this. Couldn't abolish titles and keep the royal family. We've had to take cuts. Why shouldn't they take a cut, too? Mutiny in the ranks? He doodles a boy peeling off plastic tits. It could come to that. He doodles a boy looking at another boy's ass. A light bulb attached to his head lights up. So why not put the royal family in a Darlington semi-detached on a middle-class income and let them prove themselves in a TV serial? Philip and the Queen are doing all right. She is known as Queen to all the neighbors, where she runs a small grocery shop. Every customer receives the same gracious smile and quick inquiry as to the family. She is good at remembering things like that and keeping a line moving at the same time. She learned that shaking millions of hands. Philip sells ecology equipment to factories. Good as his work and believes in it. Strong middle-class message there. Charles is a successful pop singer. Why, they all get knighted in the end, one way or another. And the wind-up is back in Buckingham, stronger than ever. CIA black. Don't you think there is some limit somewhere to what people will stand still for? Suppose the ecology equipment doesn't work. Suppose the Queen's gracious smile is reserved for her white customers. She has eyes for Enoch Powell and flying saucers. Suppose, Bonnie Prince Charlie, for Christ's sakes, we're building them up, not down, the family. All right, call in the special effects boys and give them supernatural powers. Never go too far in any direction is the basic rule on which Limey Land is built. The Queen stabilizes the whole sinking shithouse. I tell you, anything that is not going forward is going out. You know what we gotta do with special effects? No, retake. You know what we can do with special effects and electric brain stimulation? Some joker gets out of line, we press a button, and he shits in his pants at sight of her. That at least would be a step in some direction. For God's sakes, not at this point. If the Queen tries to grab more than she's got image-wise, she will lose it all. We will. All the others are hopeless. Any of you jokers like to try propping up the Queen of Denmark? I say leave it just where it is. It will stagger on for another 5 or 10 years, and that's enough. We get smart at this point, and the English Republican Party will jump out at us. Erp, erp, erp. The Queen is an alien symbol, basically Germanic in origin. The Queen is also a white symbol, the white goddess, in fact. Young people want that, black people want that. Who wants a grovel symbol? Those who need such symbols to keep positions of wealth and privilege. Look at them. Look at Jennifer's diary. ERP could be dangerous. That's right. We got a good, strong thing here. Why muck about with it? Why, the whole stinking thing could blow up in our faces. Brings on my ulcers to think about it. Yeah, we could organize ERP.
That way we'd be ready to jump in either direction. The word that made a man out of an ape and killed the ape in the process keeps man an animal, the way we like to see him. And the queen is just another prop to hold up the word. You all know what we can do with a word. Talk about the power in an atom. All hate, all fear, all pain, all death, all sex is in the word. The word was a killer virus once. The word was a killer virus once. It could become a killer virus again. The word is too hot to handle. So we sit on our asses waiting for the pension. But somebody is going to pick up that virus and use it. Virus B23. We got the shines cool back with Che Guevara in a 19th century set. Is that right? And you got the tiddlywinks cool too. You can cool anybody else who gets ideas. You gonna cool this powder keg with your moth-eaten queen? I tell you, anybody could turn it loose. You all know how basically simple it is. Sex word and image cut in with death word and image. Yeah, we could do it. What about Washington, our orders? Just one test tube and sput. What Washington? What orders? Just reading over the statement that's on the poster. I'm primarily concerned with survival, with the question of Nova conspiracies and new mythologies possible in the space age, heroes and villains, with regard to intentions towards this planet, and I realize that this is a very political statement. Now, if we see the Earth as a spaceship and go further to invoke the comparison of a lifeboat, it is, of course, of vital concern to everybody in the boat if the crew or the passengers start polluting the supply of food and water, distributing supplies on a grossly inequitable basis, knocking holes in the bottom of the boat, or worst of all, plotting to blow the boat out from under us. And what more blatant Nova conspiracy than the development and use of an atom bomb? As the founder of the Nova conspiracy, Philip Oppenheimer, said, "We have become Shiva, destroyer of worlds." Well, he may have been a little confused on his Hindu mythology, but the spirit was there. And I'm beginning to realize that the readings I've given in the last 3 years, while seemingly apolitical, are in many cases very definite political statements. Roosevelt, after inauguration, and this piece was written almost 20 years ago, appears in retrospect as designed to devalue the whole image of the presidency, a devaluation which was consummated at Watergate. And I'll read a few selections from this. Roosevelt after inauguration. Immediately after the inauguration, Roosevelt appeared on the White House balcony, dressed in the purple robes of a Roman emperor, and leading a blind, toothless lion on a gold chain. Hogg called his constituents to come and get their appointments. The constituents rushed up, grunting and squealing like the hogs they were. Men who had gone gray and toothless in the faithful service of their country were summarily dismissed in the grossest terms, like, "You're fired, you old fuck. Get your piles out of here." And in many cases, thrown bodily out of their offices. Hoodlums and riffraffs of the lowest caliber filled the highest offices of the land. When the Supreme Court overruled some of the legislation perpetrated by this vile rout, Roosevelt forced that august body, one after the other, on threat of immediate reduction to the rank of congressional laboratory attendants, to submit to intercourse with a purple-ass baboon, so that venerable honored men surrendered themselves to the embraces of a lecherous, snarling simian, while Roosevelt and his strumpet wife and the veteran brown-nosed Harry Hopkins, smoking a communal hookah of hashish, watched the lamentable spectacle with cackles of obscene laughter. Justice Blackstrap succumbed to a rectal hemorrhage on the spot. But Roosevelt only laughed and said coarsely, "Plenty more where that came from." Hopkins, unable to contain himself, rolled on the floor in psychophantic convulsion, saying over and over, "You're killing me, Chief, you're killing me." Roosevelt then appointed the baboon to replace Justice Blackstrap, diseased. So henceforth, the proceedings of the court were carried on with a screeching simian, shitting and pissing and masturbating on the table, and not infrequently leaping on one of the justices and tearing him to shreds. "He's entering a vote of dissent," Roosevelt would say with an evil chuckle. The vacancies so created were invariably filled by simians, so that in the course of time, the Supreme Court came to consist of 9 purple-ass baboons. And Roosevelt, claiming to be the only one able to interpret their decisions, thus gained control of the highest tribunal in the land. Then Roosevelt gave himself over to such vile and unrestrained conduct as is shameful to speak of. He instituted a series of contests designed to promulgate the lowest acts and instincts of which the human species is capable. There was a most unsavory act contest, a cheapest trick contest, molested child week, turn in your best friend week, professional stool pigeons disqualified, and the coveted title of all-around vilest man of the year. Roosevelt was convulsed with such hate for the species as it is that he wished to degrade it beyond recognition. "I'll make that cocksuckers glad to mutate," he would say, looking off into space as if seeking new frontiers of depravity. So let us all scan the horizons for new frontiers of depravity. This is the space age, and we are here to go. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Must be some fabulous teenagers out there with Larry Rivers' entourage. All right. Thank you for attending this final session of the NOVA Convention. And I'm speaking on behalf, of course, of Dr. Benway, Professor Burroughs, and the NOVA establishment, in particular the NOVA Police and NOVA Intelligence, which work together very closely indeed. Now, as you probably know, Dr. Benway was to have been co-chairman or chairperson, or perhaps chair thing might be the term of choice, since with Benway one never really knows exactly how the old cookie or the theater or the human condition is going to crumble. Though crumble it will, we can rest assured of that. Now, Dr. Benway was unable to attend because he was detained in Jonestown for reasons which are not entirely clear at this time. However, we're very fortunate indeed in having with us tonight the man of whom it is said by many in the know, who is the brains behind Benway, the eminence, the great gray eminence behind Benway, a poet and prophet, a man who prophesied Jonestown and prophesied My Lai and the assassination of popular leaders and corruption, monstrous corruption in very high places, while there was still merely a gleam in the eyes of these perpetrators. Great poet and prophet, and perhaps the most influential writer of our times, grand, groovy, and beloved William Burroughs.
Well, I'm sorry that Dr. Benway can't be here in person, but he does send a message. I am a practitioner of medicine. I learn from my patients, and my patients learn from me. And I'm glad to report that everything is now well under control in Jonestown. And I have a few more calls to make tonight. This is Kim Carson, Uncle Kes. The old man didn't seem to hear. He spoke to the air in front of him. Your hand and your eyes know a lot more about shooting than you do. Just learn to stand out of the way. His empty eyes, old, unbluffed, unreadable, rest on Kim. City boy, did you ever see a dog rolling carrion? Yes, sir. I was tempted to join him, sir. Did you ever see a black snake pretend to be a rattlesnake? The scene flashed in front of Kim's eyes. Kells, Ellisor, and Kim had chased and cornered a 6-foot black snake. It was a fall day, and there were leaves on the ground, and the snake coiled itself, opened its mouth, vibrating the tip of its tail in the dry leaves. And both boys saw immediately what was happening. He's pretending to be a rattlesnake, trying to scare us off. How does he know enough to do that? What do you think, Kim? The old man asked. You think he once saw a rattlesnake scare someone? No, sir, I think he just knows about other snakes. Kim, if you had your choice, would you rather be a poisonous snake or non-poisonous? Oh, poisonous, sir, like a green mamba or a spitting cobra. Why? I'd feel safer, sir. And that's your idea of heaven, feeling safer? Yes, sir. Is a poisonous snake really safer? Not really, but he must feel good after he bites someone. Safer? Yes, sir. Dead people are less frightening than live ones. Young man, I think you're an assassin. I want to be one, sir. He does make the grade. Now, just as the collapse of any major currency would bring down the whole economic system, Watergate is bringing down image currency on a worldwide basis. Actually, get some bulldozers in here and clean out all this crap. Deal with a spot of future. See what we owe to old George, his slimy reincarnation of Eleanor Roosevelt. Now, this is a space age. We are here to go, but there are those who want to keep us from going anywhere and make existence here insufferable in the meantime. Yes, this world would be a pretty easy and pleasant place to live if everybody could just mind his own business and let others do the same. But a wise old black faggot said to me years ago, some people are shits, darling. I was never able to forget it. Yeah, most of the trouble in this world has been caused by folks who can't mind their own business because they have no business their own to mind any more than a smallpox virus. And the mark of a basic shit is that he has to be right. And right here, we must make a diagnostic distinction between a hardcore virus-occupied shit and a plain, mean, no-good son of a bitch. And some of these sons of bitches don't cause any trouble at all, just want to be left alone, and others cause minor trouble like barroom fights and bank robberies. To put it country simple, former Narcotics Commissioner Harry J. Anslinger diseased was an obligate shit. Jesse James and Dillinger and Billy the Kid were just sons of bitches. I guess this is the most directly political piece that I've written. It was written on the just before the vote on Proposition 6 in San Francisco. And Proposition 6, as some of you may know, was a law put forward by someone named Senator John Briggs that would make it obligatory to fire any teacher who openly admitted to being homosexual or who said that homosexuality was a viable way of life. And this piece is called The Whole Tamale. Proposition 6 is obviously a spurious issue. What 6 pretends to be about and what it actually is about are as different as the con man's pattern his actual hidden intentions. All right, Bible Briggs, by their fruits ye shall know them, and not by their alleged intentions. Make no mistake, Proposition 6 is a potentially deadly threat to all minorities, and Senator Briggs said it himself. I'm not picking on homosexuals only, I'm after the whole tamale. Well, I think it's about time Anita Bryant and Briggs and such people met up with their constituents. And here is Arthur Thom Rowe, T-H-O-M, chairman of the White People's Committee to Restore God's Law, editor of a lurid tabloid called The Torch, published in Bass, Arkansas. And he's a good old boy, too, not a finer man in Bass, Arkansas than old Thom Rowe. After praising the courageous Anita, he gets down to committee business. The White People's Committee is not embarrassed to admit that we endorse and seek the execution of all homosexuals. God's law calls for the death penalty to the faggot slime, the whole filthy lot of them. Now old Thom is just warming up. He don't stop there. Like Briggs, he's after the whole tamale. He is also the publisher of a book called The Negro, a Beast. And his rag is replete with references to, quote, rabid, sex-perverted Jews. He's going to apply God's law to the Jews, the blacks, the Hispanics, and the Chinese. Done bit himself off quite a tamale. About 50 million folks he's going to kill, some of whom might even resist. In plain English, he's talking Civil War. And what would the Russians and the Chinese be doing while the Army, the Navy, and the police departments of America are fighting block by block through riot-torn, burning cities as power stations and reservoirs go up and guerrilla bands range through rural areas and arms poured across the borders? Wouldn't this be an engraved invitation to invade the United States of America? Now, of course, Senator Briggs will say he has nothing to do with nuts like Thom Robb, doesn't he? Wherever Briggs or Anita Bryant can find an audience to listen, you will find people in that audience who agree with Thom Robb. People with Kill a Queer for Christ stickers on their cars. These people are your constituents, Briggs. Without them, you would be talking to an empty house. Senator Briggs and people like him are appealing to the most ignorant, bigoted, and downright bestial people in this country. Now, I'm not a politician, and I'm not running for office. And I don't have to respect anybody's stupid opinions. Now, Briggs says homosexuals can't expect to be treated like normal people because they aren't normal people. Well, I say the same thing about fundamentalists. They can't expect to be treated like reasonable people because they aren't reasonable people. They're dangerous lunatics. And also, they're basically unreliable and dishonest. Now, that had a lot to do with these people. And I've never known a righteous Bible belter who wasn't a thief at heart. When you're doing business with a religious son of a bitch, get it in writing, because his word isn't worth shit. Not with the Lord telling him how to fuck you on the deal. Fundamentalists are a menace to everybody on spaceship Earth. They should be segregated into nut house or encouraged to become snake handlers. Get in a shipment of king cobras and black mambas and bushmasters and tiger snakes. You old boys dig in and test your faith. In 1968, I wrote a piece called The Coming of the Purple Better One, concerning a purple-ass baboon who runs for president on what seemed at the time an ultra-conservative ticket. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my coveted privilege and deep honor to introduce to you the distinguished Senator and former Justice of the Supreme Court, Homer Mandrill, known to his many friends as the Purple Better One. No doubt most of you are familiar with a book called African Genesis, written by Robert Ardrey, a native son of Chicago, and I may add, a true son of America. I quote from Mr. Ardrey's penetrating work. When I was a boy in Chicago, the Sunday school of a neighborhood Presbyterian church, I attended this school. I recall our Wednesday night meetings with the simplest nostalgia. We'd meet in the basement. There would be a short prayer and a shorter benediction. And we'd turn out all the lights and in total darkness hit each other over the head with chairs. Great fun, man. Mr. Ardrey's early training tempered his character to face and make known the truth about the origins and nature of mankind. Not in innocence and not in Asia was mankind born. The home of our fathers was the African highland, on a sky-swept savanna glowing with menace. The most significant of all our gifts was the legacy bequeathed to us by our immediate forebears, a race of terrestrial, flesh-eating killer apes. Raymond A. Dart, at the University of Johannesburg, with a strident voice from South Africa, that would prove the Southern ape to be the human ancestor. Dart put forward the simple thesis that man emerged from the anthropoid background for one reason only, because he was a killer. And he said that since we had tried everything else, we might, in last resort, try the truth. Man's original nature imposes itself on any human solution. The aggressive southern apes, glowing with menace, fought your battles on the perilous velds of Africa 500,000 years ago. Had he not done so, you would not now be living in this great city, in this great land of America, raising your happy families in peace and prosperity. Who more fitted to represent our glorious Simian heritage than Homer Mandrill, himself a descendant of that illustrious line? Who else can restore to this nation the spirit of true conservatism that opposes itself on any human solution? Actually, there can be only one candidate, the Purple Better One, your future president. Well, I think if Tom Robe ever got upon his white horse, he'd make Homer Mandrill look like a middle-of-the-road liberal. The aggressive southern ape, glowing with menace, may block your way to space. This is precisely his function. The human species is about 1 million years old, but only 20,000 years have really been accounted for. It's a long question mark. Perhaps a number of previous civilizations disappeared without a trace, destroyed by destructive use of a technology that could have led to the exploration of space. Instead, the human species reverted to its glorious simian heritage. It could happen again if we let that ape take the wheel. This time, we want the whole tamale.
This is the NOVA Convention. Welcome to the NOVA Convention. This is a test. On tonight's agenda, in alphabetical order, will be William Burroughs, Don Sanders and the BBC Troupe, John Cage, Merce Cunningham, Allen Ginsberg, Ann Waldman, Ed Sanders. Ladies and gentlemen, William Burroughs.
Well, first, I would like to express my appreciation for the artists and producers and helpers who have made this event possible. And people have asked me what the whole NOVA convention is about. And this is what it's about in very few words. This is the space age, and we are here to go. However, the space program has been restricted so far to a mediocre elite who at great expense have gone to the moon in an aqualung. Now, they're not really looking for space, they're looking for more time. Like the lungfish and the walking catfish, they weren't really looking for a new dimension different from water. They were looking for more water. But some of them found that they had taken an irretrievable forward step, and for better or for worse, left their gills to their makers. And as we leave the aqualung of time, we may step into an epoch comparable to the days when the early mariners set out to explore an unknown world. I can see all manner of spacecraft, some of them obviously lethal, preparing to take off. Only those who are willing to leave everything they have ever known in time need apply. It is necessary to travel, it is not necessary, and becoming increasingly difficult to live.
Tim Leary.
Well, it's a great pleasure for me to be here on this occasion. It's
Later, you can talk. Right now, let him talk. Okay?
It's a great pleasure to be here on this occasion. Well, we're going to have a good time, no matter what comes, right? Now, as far as space and time and the future is concerned, I think most of you know that I believe that the space you occupy determines the time that you live in. If you go back to the Middle East, you're going back 4,000 years, you're going back to your midbrain, and the reality that you'll have to deal with there is determined by the fact that you are there. If you're having a discussion in Belfast, Ireland today, the fact that we were there would mean that the key issue would be shaking down Catholics and Protestants. So that to move into new space is the only way that new realities can be created and the fastest way that future nervous systems can be activated. Now, Brian, when you talk about space, you said it's dangerous and it's perilous and it's who's going to control it and it's going to last too long. You make it sound like LSD was described 10 years ago.
Well,
William, do you want to say something?
Well, I feel that the human race may well be in a state of neotony. And that means simply that you take a tadpole that remains a tadpole and doesn't develop into a frog is in a state of neotony, or a salamander that never drops its gills and gets out of the water. And that we are stuck in this dimension of time. And we can't really conceive of anything beyond that, but that space is something beyond that, which is inconceivable, or difficult to conceive for people living in time. And the point is that time is a resource, and time is running out. That's why we have to go into space, just as the fish had to leave the water when the pond started to dry up.
Well, space is a very tenuous word. Does it mean outer space or does it mean inner space? Or does it just mean space, like the fifth element? I tend to think that, going places all over the place, thinking that you're going to go to one space or another, and change everything might work, but on the other hand, I think you have to change your mind to start with, and you don't have to go anywhere to do that. I think one of the things that's interesting about William's work is that he sees everything, as far as I can see, as an illusion, and wants us to understand what the illusions are about, who's making them, why we should have these illusions in the first place, and who stands to benefit by us having them. So that when you think about space, for me, when I think about space, I think about the space in those relationships. I don't think about outer space. I'm in outer space. This is outer space. It is the illusion of outer space anyway. So if anybody wants to, let me see that.
Well, we're 2/3 of the way from galactic center. And of course, from the viewpoint of any other star system, we definitely are in outer space. All the people looking out at the stars tonight from other worlds, when they see ours out there, they say, gee, I wonder that little speck out there, I wonder if there are intelligent beings on it.
Blue. We look pretty blue to all of them.
I imagine we do. But
What did you say, Brian?
We look blue to everybody in outer space.
I said we're in outer space from the point of view of anywhere else in the universe.
Do you have any?
I'd like to say something. We've just had an opportunity to catch William Burroughs red-handed doing what he's been doing for the last few decades, moving way ahead of us and kind of quietly sitting in the future and in a very low-key, sotto voce way he mentions neoteny. Well, he's there, and I'm just suddenly discovering in the last few weeks that neoteny, or pedomorphosis, is the now wait a minute is the hottest issue in evolution. Is the number one tactic that the DNA code has always used. The egg wisdom has always used this tactic. If you want to evolve a species, what you do is you keep it from becoming adult. And Bill and I have read many of the same books, and we could give you probably hours of illustrations of how the dinosaurs, for example, developed an adult species which was over-specialized in control of territory. If
Where is he? Keep going. What I think is that time has to do with form. Time has to do with form. You are so old, therefore you have that form. I am so old, therefore I have this form. Something that is made quickly looks as though it's made quickly. Something that's slow looks handmade. Space has to do with ideas.
right.
This is inside, that is outside. Everything in here is my idea, everything outside of it is your idea. I don't like your idea. Why don't you listen to my idea? That's what I think space is about. So if we get involved with the idea, it's about territory, essentially. It's another territory.
This piece was written for Harper's Magazine in reply to the question, when did you stop wanting to be president? When did I stop wanting to be president? At birth, certainly, and perhaps before. In this life or any previous incarnations, I have been able to check out I never wanted to be president. This innate decision was confirmed when I became literate and saw the president pawing babies and spouting bullshit. I attended Los Alamos Ranch School, where they later made the atom bomb, and bombs bursting in air over Hiroshima gave proof through the night that our flag was already there. Then came the Teapot Dome scandal under President Harding, and I remember the unspeakable Gaston memes. skin of an aristocratic Southern family, infamous private eye and go-between in this miasma of graft, walking into a hotel room full of bourbon-drinking, cigar-smoking lobbyists and fixers with a laundry hamper he puts in the middle of the floor. Fill it up, boys, and we talk business. I do not mean to imply that my youthful idealism was repelled by this spectacle. I had by then learned to take a broad, general view of things. My political ambitions were simply of a humbler and less conspicuous caliber. I hoped at one time to become Commissioner of Sewers for St. Louis County. $300 a month with every possibility of getting one shitty paws deep into a slush fund. And to this end, I attended a softball game where such sinecures were assigned to the deserving and the fortunate. And everybody I met said, now I'm old so-and-so running for such and such, and anything you do for me, I'll appreciate. My boyish dreams fanned by this heady atmosphere and 3 mint juleps, I saw myself already in possession of the coveted post, which called for a token appearance twice a week to sign a few letters at the old courthouse. While I'm there, might as well put it on the sheriff for some marijuana he has confiscated, and he'd better play ball or I will route a sewer through his front yard. And then across the street to the courthouse cafe for a coffee with other lazy, worthless bastards in the same line of business. And we wallow in corruption like contented alligators. I never wanted to be a front man like Harding or Nixon, taking the rap, shaking hands, and making speeches all day. Who in his right mind would want a job like that? As Commissioner of Sewers, I would not be called upon to pet babies, make speeches, shake hands, have lunch with the Queen. In fact, the fewer voters who knew of my existence, the better. Let kings and presidents keep the limelight. I prefer a whiff of coal gas as the sewers rupture for miles around. I have made a deal on the piping which has bought me a $30,000 home. And there is talk in the press of sex cults and drug orgies carried out in the stink of what made them possible. Fluttering from the roof of my ranch-style house over my mint and marijuana, Old Glory floats lazily in the tainted breeze. But there were sullen mutters of revolt from the peasantry. My teenage daughter's as cunt deep in shit. Is this the American way of life? I thought so, and I didn't want it changed. Sitting there in my garden, smoking the sheriff's reefers, coal gas on the wind, sweet in my nostrils as the smell of oil to an oil man or the smell of bullshit to a cattle baron. I sure did a sweet thing on those pipes. And I'm covered, too. What I got on the governor wouldn't look good on the front page, would it now? And I have my special police to deal with vandalism and sabotage. All handsome youths, languid and vicious as reptiles, described in the press as no more than minions, lackeys and bodyguards to His Majesty the Sultan of Sewers. The thoughts of youth are long, long thoughts. Then I met the gubernatorial candidate, and he looked at me as if trying to focus my image through a telescope and said, in effect, anything I do for you, I'll depreciate. And I felt the dream slipping away from me, receding into the past, dim, jerky, far away, the discreet gold letters on a glass door. William S. Burroughs, Commissioner of Sanitation. Somehow I had not intersected. I was not one of them. Perhaps I was simply the wrong shape. Some of my classmates, plump, cynical, unathletic boys with narrow shoulders and broad hips, made the grade and went on to banner headlines concerning $200,000 of the taxpayers' money and a non-existent bridge or highway, I forget which. It was a long time ago. I have never aspired to political office since. The Sultan of Sewers lies buried in a distant 1930 softball game. Thank you. This gentleman is a death dwarf, as you can see, manipulated by remote control. Compliments of Mr. and Mrs. D. Give me a shot, says the dwarf, and I'll tell you something interesting. Hydraulic metal hands proffer a tray of phosphorescent meal, yellow-brown in color like pulverized amber. The dwarf takes out a hypo from a silver case and shoots a pinch of the meal in the main line. Images. Millions of images. That's what I eat. Cyclotron shit. Ever try kicking that habit with apomorphine? Now I got all the images of sex acts and torture ever took place anywhere. And I can just blast it out and control you gooks right down to the molecule. I got orgasms. I got screams. I got all the images any hit poet ever shit out. My power's coming, my power's coming, my power's coming. He goes into a faith healer routine, rolling his eyes and frothing at the mouth. And I got millions and millions and millions of images of me. He nods out. He snaps back into focus, screaming and spitting at Uranian Willie. You hick, you rat, called a buzz on me. All right, I'm finished, but you're still a lousy fucking fink. Just your remarks to me, said the DS. All right, you hick sheriffs. I'll cook you all down to decorticated canine preparations. You'll never get the apomorphine formula in time. Never, never, never. Caustic, white-hot lava drips from his teeth. The smell of phosphorus fills the room. Human dogs. Don't mind if I take another shot, do you? Of course not. After giving information, you will be disintoxicated. Disintoxicated, he said. My God, look at me. Good, sir. To the purpose. Shit. Uranian shit. That's what my human dogs eat, and I like to rub their nose in it. Beauty, poetry, space. What good is all that to me if I don't get the image fix I'm in the ovens, you understand? All the pain and hate images come loose. You understand that, you dumb hick? I'm finished, but your eyes still pop out. Naked candy of adolescent image, Panama. Who look out different? Cook you all down to decorticated mandrakes. Don't you think, Mr. D, it is in your interest to facilitate our work with the apomorphine formula? It wouldn't touch me, not with the habit I got. How do you know? Have you tried? Of course not. If I allowed anyone to develop the formula, he would be out, you understand? And it only takes one out to kick over my hypo tray. After all, you don't have much choice, Mr. D. Again, the image snapped back, fading now and flickering like an old film. I still have the boardroom reports. I can split the planet wide open tomorrow. And you little rat, you'll end up on ice in the ovens. Baked Alaska, we call it. Nothing like a baked Alaska fix to hold me vegetable. Always plenty wise guys waiting on the baked Alaska. The dwarf's eyes sputtered blue sparks. A reek of burning flesh billowed through the room. Mr. Bradley, Mr. Martin, hear us through the hole in thin air. Thing police, all boardroom reports now are ended. Fading out in Honolulu, Uork, Aris, Austin. The great wind, revolving turrets, towers, palaces. Sound and image flakes fall. His dogs that were his eyes shut off, Mr. Bradley, Mr. Gone away, pulled the reverse switch. Place no good, no bueno. Turned off the Swedish River of Gothenburg, Saturday, March 17th, 1962, past time. These colorless sheets are empty. You never existed at all. I smoke is all, boy. Goodbye to William. Ahab, last twinges of a coffin, posting this book where the awning flaps a distant thank you. Explosion splits the boat. SOS, 5 times SOS. Here this little time, 5 scars left the dawn. Goodbye to Mr. Martin, who never had courage to let go. He heard your summons, time hiccups. Last cigarette, loud and clear. Last flag fading. Rings of Saturn in the morning sky. Whatever remains could give no human contacts. Front for the hot reward business. Chinese youth sent the resistance vision to you tilting through pinball machine. Remember, I was the ship gives no flesh identity. Lips fading. Silence to say goodbye. If you wanted a cup of tea with whatever remains, bread knife in the heart, vague quivering excuse for being. Shadow American, look any place, empty noon. Our actors proffer the account. Sheets are empty. Many years ago, that bread knife in the war, inessential word from the past. For I have known through faulty human equipment the vacant courage to let all messages in and out. To the mountain wind, loud and clear now. Through faulty human equipment hustling myself. Your stale overcoat not taking any dirty pictures. Twisting hole in everybody. Spilling out limestone, John Hamburger, Mary, Jackie Blue Note. Had enough movies. No good, no bueno. Yes, adios, mister. I go home having lost. In sun I held the vacant courage to proffer the mountain wind. And I can see the flesh words answer your summons. No more falling on all flesh. Sheets are empty. The recordings remain. Last human contacts used as model for a bad move. Other identities are a rubbish heap to life form A. Better than shouts, no good, no bueno. Crime child, it's 5 times. Had enough flack of absent world. Child of Nova, the story over. I fold distant fingers. The doctor on stage, hand falling. Slow metal fires tap on the bloody sky. I think now I go home. Goodbye to William. You and I fading. Silence to say, you are yourself, Mr. Bradley, Mr. Martin, who never existed at all. Silence to say goodbye. Introducing John Stanley Hart, a newspaper tycoon who's obsessed with immortality. Now, Mr. Hart made his debut in a book called Apuk is Here. Apuk the Destroyer is the Mayan god of death. From time to time, Mr. Hart is just a bit ashamed of being the shit he knows he is. And he makes sporadic and rather unfortunate attempts to be a nice guy. Nobody does more harm than people who feel bad about doing it. God defend us all from a difficult decision in the Pentagon. Sad, poison, nice guy, more poison than nice. He entered the bar with the best intentions in the world of establishing a warm human relationship with the local people, who had been up to now a bit standoffish. He walked into the bar with his fishing gear and a bit of a swagger. Have to stand up to these people, you know. They respect you for it. He found himself somewhat stonily received, and turning from the bar with his mug of beer to face the room, he maladroitly snagged an old peasant in the scrotum with his fishing plug. He whipped out his switchblade with a poorly timed attempt at easy joviality. Well, I guess we'll just have to cut the whole thing off. Turning away, he made an ineffectual gesture of a New Yorker cartoon with his knife, inadvertently blinding the proprietor's infant son. Seeing that all his friendly overtures had fallen lamentably flat, he saw fit to withdraw as unobtrusively and expeditiously as possible. Thank you. This text, written in collaboration with Kells Elvins in 1938, commemorates the first appearance of Dr. Benway. It's called Twilight's Last Gleamings. SS America off Jersey coast. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no cause for alarm. We have a minor problem in the boiler room, but everything is now under sound effects of a nuclear blast. Explosion splits the boat. Dr. Benway's ship's doctor drunkenly added 2 inches to a 4-inch incision with one stroke of his scalpel. Perhaps the appendix is already out, doctor, the nurse said, and peering dubiously over his shoulder. I saw a little scar. The appendix already out. I'm taking the appendix out. What do you think I'm doing here? Perhaps the appendix is on the left side, doctor. That happens sometimes, you know. Stop breathing down my neck. I'm coming to that. Don't you think I know where an appendix is? I studied appendectomy in 1904 at Harvard. He lifts the abdominal wall and searches along the incision, dropping ashes from his cigarette. Get me a new scalpel. This one's got no edge to it. He thrusts a red fist at her. The doctor reels back and flattens against the wall, a bloody scalpel clutched in one hand. The patient slides off the operating table, spilling intestines across the floor. Dr. Benway sweeps instruments, cocaine, and morphine into his satchel. Sour up. I can't be expected to work under such conditions. By the dawn's early light, Dr. Benway pushed through a crowd at the rail and boarded the first lifeboat. Are you all right? He said, seating himself among the women. I'm the doctor. Thank you. This is from a Western in progress entitled The Place of Dead Roads. My protagonist, Kim Carson, finds himself in deadly conflict with Mr. Hart, the press tycoon, and old man Bickford, a beef and oil baron. And Bickford has a special price on Kim's head because Kim killed old man Bickford's son in a gunfight. Real Western. Yeah. For 3 days, Kim camped on the mesa top, sweeping the valley with his binoculars. A cloud of dust headed south told him they figured him to ride south for Mexico. He had headed north instead, into a land of sandstone formations, and everywhere caves pocked into the red rock like bubbles in boiling oatmeal. Some of the caves had been lived in at one time or another. Rusty tin cans, pottery shards, cartridge cases. Kim found an arrowhead 6 inches long, chipped from obsidian, and a smaller arrowhead of rose-colored flint. Dusk was falling and blue shadows gathered in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains to the east. Sangre de Cristo, blood of Christ, rivers of blood, mountains of blood. Does Christ never get tired of bleeding? It is raining in the Jimenez Mountains. It is raining, Anita Huffington. Last words of General Grant spoken to his nurse. Circuits in his brain flickering out like lightning in gray clouds. Pottery shards, arrowheads, rusting fishhooks. You can see there was a cabin here once. A hypodermic syringe glints in the sun. He holds the rose flint arrowhead in his hand. And he fondles the obsidian arrowhead, so fragile that they break every time they were used, like bee stings, he wonders. Somebody made this arrowhead. It had a creator long ago. This arrowhead is the only proof of his existence. So living things can also be seen as artifacts designed for a purpose. So perhaps the human artifact had a creator. Perhaps a stranded space traveler needed the human vessel to continue his voyage, and he made it for that purpose. He died before he could use it. He found another escape route. This artifact, shaped to fill a forgotten need, now has no more meaning or purpose than this arrowhead without the arrow and the bow, the arm and the eye. Or perhaps the human artifact was the creator's last card, played in an old game many light years ago. Chill of empty space, Kim gathers wood for a fire. The stars are coming out. There's the Big Dipper. His father points to Betelgeuse in the night sky over St. Louis. His father's gray face on a pillow. Helpless pieces in the game he plays on this checkerboard of nights and days, so fragile, shivers and gathers wood. Slave gods in the firmament. He remembers his father's last words. Stay out of churches, son. All they got a key to is the shit house. And swear to me, you will never wear a policeman's badge. Hither and thither moves and checks and slays, and one by one back in the closet lays rusty tin cans, pottery shards, cartridge cases, arrowheads, a hypodermic syringe glints in the sun. Now, this folkloric text from the Lexington Narcotic Hospital was actually inspired by Juvenal, the Roman satirist. He's speaking of Greek parasites and sycophants. All arts, all sciences, a fasting Greek knows, bid him go to hell he goes. If you but say you're warm, he breaks into a sweat. If you complain of a draft, he calls for his overcoat. There is an exclusive wing of Lexington reserved for the do-rights, who are considered good rehabilitation prospects. They get better rooms and more medications. A do-right always shows up with letters from his clergyman, banker, employer, and, pictures of himself as an Eagle Scout, shaking hands with a priest on graduation day. There's no limit to what they'll do. The type falls all over himself to light the boss's cigarette. The doctor walks into the ward and says, "Rather warm in here." As one man, the do-rights break out in a sweat and rush around opening windows. Cold in here, isn't it? Immediately, the do-rights see their breath in the air, snatch blankets and bundle themselves up to a chorus of chattering teeth. Front office, brown nose, fink to the bone. "Doctor, when I die, I want to be buried right in the same coffin with you." You're the finest, most decent, most deeply humane man I've ever known. I'm putting you down for additional medication, son. Thank you, doctor. Pushers should receive the death penalty. Of such stuff are do-rights made. Get there firstest with the brownest nose. While down in the dim gray wards and day rooms where they do wrongs, hawk and spit and shiver and vomit, fucking Crocker wouldn't give me a goofball. He asked me what the American flag means to me, and I tell him, soak it in the heroin, Doc, and I'll suck it. He says I got the wrong attitude. I should see the chap and get straight with Jesus. And then, with the tears streaming down their lousy fink faces, the do-rights leap up as one man and bellow out the Star-Spangled Banner. This is a place of dead roads. Rod riding yeggs and peat men and cat burglars, bindle stiffs and hobo jungles. Here is Salt Chunk Mary the Fence in her red brick house down by the tracks in Portobello, Idaho. Mary keeps an iron pot of pork and beans always on the fire. You eat first and talk business later. Watches and rings slop down on the kitchen table. She names a price. She doesn't name another. Mary could say no quicker than any woman I ever knew, and none of her no's ever meant yes. She kept the money in a cookie jar, but nobody thought about that. Her cold gray eyes would have seen the thought, and maybe something goes wrong on the next sleigh. John Law just happens by, or a citizen comes up with a load of double-zero buckshot into your soft and tenders. Here am I. Got it. Like Mr. Hart, Kim has a dark side to his character. Unlike Mr. Hart, Kim is not afraid to hear the word death or take his bloody chances in a shootout. Saturday night, and maybe somebody from across the river comes into Uncle Tess's saloon looking for trouble. He won't have to look far. The short-barreled double-action .44 tonight, Kim decides. As soon as Kim walks through the swinging door, he knows this is it. 2 men at the bar by the door. One is tall and thin with a dead, sour wooden face. The other tall and fattish and loose-lipped with lead-gray eyes. Loose-lipped smiles showing his awful yellow teeth. Now, I don't like drinking in the same room with a fairy. Do you, Clem? Cat says I do, Cash. Yeah, they want to bat it around a while, but Kim doesn't. Are you gentlemen referring to me? Kim's hand sweeps down to his belt and up, smooth and casual, like he was giving Clem his visiting card. As Clem clears his holster with the .45, Kim shoots him in the stomach. Clem doubles forward and his false teeth fly out. His .45 plows a hole in the floor. Kim pivots and shoots Cash in the hollow of the throat. The bullet goes through and spatters the wall with slivers of white bone. Cash buckles and his .45 chunks back into the holster. Clem is weaving around trying to recock his .45 with numb fingers. Taking his time, Kim shoots him in the forehead. Both assholes are dead before they hit the floor. As Kim looks down at the two bodies crumpled there, spilling blood and brains on the floor, he experiences a rush of pure joy. 2 enemies will never bother him again. 2 lousy sons of bitches melted into air and gun smoke. Like a prisoner who has killed his guards, he steps lightly through an open door. Progressive education. When Kim was 15, his father allowed him to withdraw from the school because he was so unhappy there and so much disliked by the other boys and their parents. I don't want that boy in the house again, said Colonel Greenfield. He looks like a sheep-killing dog. It is a walking corpse, said a St. Louis matron poisonously. Years later, Kim settled that account. When informed of her death, he said, "It isn't every corpse that can walk, hers can't." The boy is rotten clear through, and he stinks like a polecat, Judge Ferris pontificated. But this was more or less true. When angered or aroused or excited, Kim flushed bright red and steamed off a rank, ruddish animal smell. "The child is not wholesome," said Mr. Kindheart with his usual restraint. Kim was the most unpopular boy in the school, if not in the town of St. Louis. They got nothing to teach anyway, his father said. Why, the headmaster's a fucking priest. The summers they spent at the farm, and Kim loved squirrel hunting in the early morning, and usually went hunting with Jerry Ellisor, who lived next door, because Jerry had a slinky black hound dog. And everybody knows you can't find any squirrels without a dog to bark up the tree where a squirrel is. Kim remembers a friend of his father's, an unobtrusively wealthy man who traveled all over the world studying unusual methods of hand-to-hand fighting. And he wrote a book about it. Kim remembers him as looking very safe and happy. He could kill anyone in sight, and he knew it. And that was a good feeling. The book was fascinating. Chinese practitioners who can kill with a soft, twisting blow just in the right place and at the right time. The soft touch, it is called. Kim hummed the funeral march happily. and a magnificent, sulky old Indian who specialized in a lightning blow to the testicles. The golden target, he called it. He was the most unpleasant man I have ever met, the writer reports. After a scant quarter hour in his company, I was impotent for a full week. So the writer, he tries to impress this old Midas by breaking a stack of bricks with his karate chop. And the Indian sets up an equal stack and adds one brick. Then he just sort of lightly thumps the stack. And the writer points a finger at the top brick, which is undamaged. The old practitioner lifts the top brick. All the bricks under it have been shattered as if hit by a sledgehammer. And a bartender in Paris had fashioned a weapon from his breath. By taking certain herbs, he had developed a breath so pestiferous that, then standing almost 6 feet away, breathed on me. Words cannot convey the vertiginous, retching horror that enveloped me as I lost consciousness. And for days after, I shuddered at the memory of that awesome breath. Well, he beats the skunk at his own game, but generally speaking, when it comes down to hand, teeth, claw, poison, quill, shock, fighting, animals beat humans in any direction. So Kim had, of course, thought of living weapons, but the only animal that has been taught to attack reliably on command is the dog, though many other animals will be vastly more efficient as fighting machines. The bobcat, the lynx, the incomparable wolverine that can drive a bear from its kill. Kim looked in disdain at Jerry's dog, Rover, a skulking, cowardly, inefficient animal. Kim usually spotted the squirrel before Rover could sniff it out. When Jerry wasn't around, Kim would corner Rover and transfix him with his witch stares. He intoned, "Bad dog." And Rover begins to cower and cringe and whimper, and finally, desperate to ingratiate himself, he rolls on his back and pisses all over himself. While Kim enjoyed this spectacle, it was not enough to compensate for the continuous proximity of this filthy, fawning, vicious, shit-eating beast. But then, who am I to be critical, Kim thought philosophically. Kim had just read a juicy story about African medicine men who capture hyenas and blind them with red-hot needles and burn out their vocal cords as they intone certain spells, binding the tortured animals to their will to fashion a silent, dedicated instrument of death. Kim looks speculatively at Rover and licks his lips. And Rover creeps whimpering behind Jerry's legs. The colonel fills his pipe. They attacked at dawn like gray shadows. I saw a boy go down hamstrung. Next thing, his throat is ripped out. I couldn't see what was doing. It was like a ghost attack. But the boys knew, and the cry went up, "Shmoon, shmoon." That's the native word for hyenas blinded by the beastly medicine men. Now, we intended to capture a male gorilla of the mountain species. There are somewhat smaller species. There are somewhat smaller species. There are somewhat smaller than the lowland breeds. So we had a cage just so big and big enough, and I managed to nip into it and lock the door. Boys pleading to be let in. It's like, that sight will haunt me to my dying day. Couldn't chance it, you know. One boy wasn't at the door, and that would have been it. In their blind animal panic, they couldn't understand my position. They screamed curses at me. Well, Kim put it, what can you expect from people with no breeding? Oh, yes, of course, exactly. Kipling, you know, the writer chap, speaks of the lesser breed without the law. Awfully depressing, all that. Kim recruits a band of flamboyant and picturesque outlaws called the Wild Fruits. There's the crying gun who breaks into tears at sight of his opponent. What the matter? Somebody take your lollipop? Oh, senor, I'm sorry for you. And the priest who goes into a gunfight giving his adversary the last rites. And the blind gun who zeroes in with bat squeaks. Kim trains his men to identify themselves with death. He takes some rookie guns out to a dead horse rotting in the sun, eviscerated by vultures. Kim points to the horse steaming there in the noonday heat. All right, roll in it. What? Roll in it. Get the stink of death into your chaps and your boots and your guns and your hair. Well, most of us puked at first, but we got used to it, and vultures followed us around, hopefully. We always ride into town with the wind behind us. The townspeople gag and retch. My God, what's that stink? It's the stink of death, citizens. And I think, personally, the whole planet stinks of death. And what are we going to do about it? Well, all this may have happened many times before in this old universe. Here we are, trillions of years ago in Galaxy X, and a rally has been organized to protest the use of black holes as an energy source. A bit late, as it turned out. Closing time, gentlemen. Brian Geisen has a bedtime story. It seems that trillions of years ago, a giant flicked grease from his fingers. One of these gobs of grease is our universe on its way to the floor. This piece is called The Unworthy Vessel. Daddy Longlegs looked like Uncle Sam on stilts, and he ran this osteopath clinic outside East St. Louis and took in a few junkie patients. For $2 a week, they could stay on the nod in green lawn chairs and look at the oaks and grass stretching down to a little lake in the sun. The nurse moves around the lawn with her silver tray, feeding the junkie, and we called her mother, wouldn't you? Doc Benway and me was holed up there after a rumble in Dallas involving this aphrodisiac ointment. Doc goofed on ether and mixed in too much Spanish fly and burned the prick off the police commissioner. So we come to Daddy Longlegs to cool off, and we find him cool and casual in a dark room with potted rubber plants and a silver tray on the table where he likes to see a week in advance. The nurse shows us to a room with rose wallpaper, and we have this bell. Any hour of the day or night, just ring, and Mother charges in with a loaded hypo. One day we are sitting out in the lawn chairs with lap robes, and Doc picks up a piece of grass. He says, "Junk turns you on a vegetable. It's green, see? A green fix should last a long time." So we check out of the clinic and rent a house, and Doc starts cooking up this green junk. The basement is full of tanks, smell like a compost heap of junkies. So finally he draws off this heavy green fluid and loads it into a hypo big as a bicycle pump. "Now we must find a worthy vessel," he says. We flush out this old goofball artist and tell him it is pure Chinese H from the Ling dynasty. And Doc shoots the whole pint of green right into the main line. Yellow Jacket turns fibrous gray-green and withers up like an old turnip. And I say, "I'm getting out of here, me." Doc says, "An unworthy vessel, obviously." Withdraw from the case. Thank you. The president, with his toadies and familiars, is now 500 feet down in solid rock, with enough fine foods, wines, liquors, cash, coke, and heroin to last 100 years, and the longevity drugs to enjoy, held off the market in the interest of national security. The president appears on national TV with his well-cut suit hanging loose on his skinny frame to pipe out in adolescent treble, alternately pompous and cracking. We categorically deny that there are any crack, so-called fountain of youth, drugs, procedures, or treatments that are being held back from the American people crack. He flashes a boyish smile and runs a comb through his unruly, abundant hair. And I categorically dismiss as without foundation rumors that I myself, the First Lady, my fag son, my colleagues in the cabinet are sustaining ourselves on state-of-the-art vampiric technology, drawing off from the American pimples, crack, giggle, so-called energy units. His hair stands up and crackles, and he gives the American people a finger. I got mine, fuck you, every crumb for himself. It is Colonel Bradfield's job to investigate the practical potentials of ESP, sorcery, witchcraft, the lot. He doesn't give a shit for natural laws or what is and isn't possible. All he cares about are results. Bring me the ones that work. What'd you bring this old beast in here for? A withered old man dressed only in a loincloth, stiff with yellow piss stains, stinking like a snake cave in spring, sits down in a leather armchair. Fumigating the chair will be inadequate, the colonel decides. He's a natural chief. He can throw an operative curse. I don't doubt it. He can kill by proximity. He's got a good track record, Chief. Sure. And 80 years in the making. So how did he get that way? To be a magician, you gotta be inhuman in some way. Easiest is to eat your own shit and eat it steady. Eat it in and shit it out and eat it in again. It gets eviler and dirtier, a stink nobody can smell and live. But who am I to be critical? Trouble is, it just isn't practical. But Chief, no trace, no way it could be traced to us. The hell there isn't. You think the Ivans aren't into this shit up to the ass? They can make up the evidence, we all do it, no way to trace it, big deal. 80 shit-eating years to turn out one old human centipede can throw a curse if you hold him steady on target. I can train an agent in hours with untraceable poisons and toxins, electronic devices to produce arrhythmical heartbeats. He died in his sleep, dreaming about a beautiful, deadly woman, and all he wanted to do was die in her arms. See what I mean? We don't need it. But Chief, we can't just throw away a thing like this. Indeed, where can we throw it? It's radioactive. Get it out of here for starters and take the chair out with it. Well, political program, every man a god. And how can this be accomplished? Well, to put it country simple, by doing your job and doing it well. Because there are many gods. A god of whores and thieves and pushers. A god of fevers and plagues who rides on a whispering south wind. A god of the long chance, the horse that comes from last to win in the stretch. The punch-drunk fighter who comes off the floor to win by a knockout. A god of anti-heroes and outrage. the ship's captain who put on women's clothes and rushed into the first lifeboat, the pilot who bailed out of a burning plane, leaving his passengers to crash, a God of future space travelers who are ready to leave the whole human context behind and take a step into the unknown. Every man a God, that is, if he can qualify. You can't be a God of anything unless you can do it. I think the political and social chaos we are seeing on every side reflects an underlying biologic crisis. End of the human line. All species are doomed from conception, like all individuals. Evolution did not come to a reverent halt with Homo sapiens. We have the technologies to recreate a flawed artifact and to produce improved and variegated models designed for space conditions. Perhaps there is still time. Is this being done or even considered? Back to the church, the home, and the family. Back to the simple American virtues that made this country great and can make this country great again. If I may be allowed a flight of whimsy involving articulate dinosaurs, fellow reptiles, I do not hesitate to tell you that we face grave problems. I do not hesitate to tell you that we have the answer. Size is the answer. Increase size. There are those who say size is not the answer. There are those who even propose that we pollute our pure reptilian strain with mammalian amalgamations and crossbreeding. And I say to you that the only way I could survive was by mating with egg-eating rats, then I would choose not to survive. But we will survive. We will increase both in size and in numbers, and we will continue to dominate this planet as we have done for 300 million years. Bigger is better and biggest is best. Armored models thump their tails in earth-shaking applause. Herbivorous dens wallow and splash in swamp mud. Carnivores bear their huge fang dripping streamers of saliva and approval. But a wise old dine turns sadly from the TV and addresses his offspring. Son, it's the end of the line. We're ugly, idiot, bellowing beasts. Some of us are 60 feet long with a brain the size of a walnut. Where can this end? In a natural history museum, our bones gawked at by pimply adolescents. Say, I wonder how big his crick was. Their turn will come. Back to the home and the family, back to simple American virtues, biologically goes back. It's the law. Dolphins lived on land at one time. We know that because they have air-breathing lungs. Near the sea, it might be their lost gills. Glot, clump, blighty. A step that involves alterations is irretrievable. We must now make such a step if we are to survive at all. And it had better be good. I have predicted the transition from time into space will involve biologic alterations. Such alterations are already manifest. Astronauts stand to lose their bones and teeth in a turbot. If you don't use it, you lose it. A skeleton has no function in a weightless state. So what does the end result look like? Well, rather like an octopus or a jellyfish. Beau Brummel, the restoration dandy, spent hours every morning putting exactly the right crease into his cravats by lowering his chin just so. Often his valet would carry out armfuls of crumpled linen. Our failures. So we can imagine the cosmic butler carrying out bundles of unworkable monstrosities. Our failures. Here in the middle of a film to find myself one of the actors. The chief has asked me to his house for dinner. Around 8, Rogers. Help yourself to a drink, Rogers. He gestured to the drink wagon. There's keef, of course, if you want it. I mixed myself a short drink and declined the keef. It gives me a headache. I'd seen the chief smoking with his Arab contacts, but that didn't give me a license to smoke. Besides, it does give me a headache. The chief's cover story is an eccentric old French comte who is translating the Koran into Provençal. And sometimes he will pull cover and bore his guest catatonic. You see, he really knows Provençal in Arabic. The chief wasn't pulling cover tonight. He was expansive, and watch your step, Rogers, I told myself, sipping a weak scotch. So I think you're the man for a highly important, and I may add, highly dangerous assignment, Rogers. You fell for that crap. Well, sir, he is impressive, I said cautiously. He's a cheap old ham, said the chief. He sat down and filled his keep pipe with one hand. He smoked and blew the ash out, absently caressing a gazelle that nuzzled his knee. Gotta stay ahead of the commies, or everybody's kids will be learning Chinese. What a windbag. I endeavored to look non-committal. Have you any idea what we're doing here, Rogers? Well, no, sir. I thought not. Never tell them what you want until you've got them where you want them. I'm going to show you a documentary film. Well, I happened onto this good thing through a Mexican shoeshine boy. You, Kiki, come out here and show Mr. Rogers how pretty you are. Kiki stands in the doorway smiling. Now that lad, he's a doll, isn't he? He's one of the best deep trance mediums I have ever handled. Through him, I was able to teleport myself to a Mayan set and bring back the pictures. The whole thing was so frantic, I cooled it all the way up in my reports. All I said was, it looks like a lovely whoop. That's code for weapon of unlimited potential. Now, he's hotting up now. The old priest rocks back and forth. His lips part, and a dry insect music buzzes out. It's known as singing the pictures. The principle is alternating current. Now that old fuck can alternate pain and pleasure on a subvocal, perhaps even a molecular level, 60 times a second. Goading the natives around on stock probs into the prearranged molds laid down in the sacred books. Now, a few singers can deliver direct current, and they are only called. The control system you have just seen broke down. This happened quite suddenly. A whole generation was born that felt neither pain nor pleasure. There were no soldiers to bring captives from other tribes, since soldiers would have endangered the control machine. They relied entirely on local criminals for the pain and pleasure pictures. As a last resort, they called in the incomparable yellow serpent. The serpent is carried in on his amber throne, blue snake eyes, skin like yellow parchment, two long serpent fangs grafted into the upper jaw. As the current pulses through him, he begins to rock back and forth. He shifts from AC to DC. A thin siren wail breaks from his lips, now open to the yellow fangs. Death, death, death. The pictures crash and leap from his eyes, blasting worker and priest alike to smoldering fragments. Death, death, death. A thin siren wail rises and falls over empty cities. This secret of the ancient Mayans, which few are competent to practice. When comes such another singer as the old yellow serpent? Now, the technical department think we are all as crazy as our way of life is reprehensible. Bring us the ones that work, they say. Facts, figures, personnel. Put that joker Death on the line. Take care of Mayo and his gang of cutthroats. I was privileged to assist, in a manner of speaking, at the Yellow Serpent's last broadcast in Washington, D.C. Room in the Pentagon. Generals, CIA, State Department, fidget about with that top secret, hottest thing ever look, open line to the President, strategic in NATO, standing by. The old Yellow Serpent is carried in by 4 Marine guards. He begins to rock back and forth. He breathes in baby cousins, breathes out death rattles. He sucks in wheat fields and spits out dust bowls. He's just warming up, says a CIA man to a 5-star general. The old serpent shifts to D.C. blazing like a comet. Death, death, death. The pictures lash and crackle from his eyes. Death, death, death. A wall blows out, spilling brass 18 floors to the street. Death, death, death. And now the serpent swings his whip in the sky. Here live stupid, vulgar sons of bitches who thought they could hire death as a company cop. Empty streets, old newspapers in the wind, a rustle of darkness and wires. Old Sarge smiles. The Green Nun has stopped the unfortunate traveler in front of her red brick priory set among oak trees, green lawns, and flower beds. Oh, do come in and see my mental ward and the wonderful things we are doing for the patients. She shows Audrey into a bare, cold wardroom, crayon drawings on the wall. A nun walks up and down with a ruler. The patients are busy with plasticine and crayons. It looks like a kindergarten, but some of the children are middle-aged. The door clicks shut and her voice changes. You'll find plasticine and crayons over there. You must have permission to leave the room for any purpose. A paunchy guard with a tin helmet and wide leather belt stands beside her. And so the years passed. Sometimes, as a special treat, there were nature walks in the garden. Bob there with 3 snarling Alsatians on a lead. The patients could watch a praying mantis eat her mate. Daily confessions were heard by the Green Nun on a lie detector. that could also give a very nasty shock in the nasty places, while the green nun intoned slowly, "Thou shalt not bear false witness." These confessions she wrote out in green ink, keeping a separate ledger book for each patient. Once, after a particularly degraded confession, she levitated to the ceiling in the presence of an awed young nun. Every night she put on Christ's drag with a shimmering halo and visited some young nun in her cell. She liked to think of herself as the nun in a poem by Sarah Teasdale. Infinite tenderness, infinite irony is hidden forever in her closed eyes, who must have learned too well in her long loneliness how empty wisdom is, even to the wise. She was an inveterate hypochondriac and dosed herself liberally with laudanum. As a result, she suffered from chronic constipation, which could put a comely young nun on high colonic duty. This honor was invariably followed by a nocturnal visit from Christ with a strap on. In her youth, the green nun had toyed with the idea of ordering Bob to raid a sperm bank. Then she could claim the Christ child. She put aside these ambitious thoughts. Her work in the kindergarten was more important than worldly glamour, her picture on the cover of Life. This reading is from an unpublished book entitled Apuk is Here. Apuk is the Mayan god of death, but unlike the medieval Christian conception of death, Apuk was not regarded by the Mayans as purely negative and destructive, but simply as a stage of life, making way for rebirth and regeneration. This book concerns an American billionaire who is obsessed by a desire for immortality. He discovers lost Mayan books containing some of the basic secrets of life and death, and uses this knowledge to set up a rather ill-advised control machine. Train whistle, train in lunar landscape of northern Mexico. Cut to Mr. Hart's private car, books spread out on a table. He is reading the books laboriously from a Spanish key. Now here's the young corn god turning into death. When I die, I become death. Death is the seed from which I grow. Now this dying to produce oneself sounds awfully hit and miss to canny young Hart. Obsessed by his desire for immortality, he does not grasp the full significance of this simple survival formula, nor the seeds of disaster it contains. Mr. Hart certainly does not think of himself as a Christian, yet all his thinking is formed by Western Christianity. He thinks in either-or, that is, one God terms. He is looking for the secrets of fear and death. Must be one thing or the other, he tells himself. It's all very simple. The priests became death, and therefore they could not die. Can't leave any loose ends trailing about. At dawn, death came to the hut. The youth tried to face him and hurl a magic object. He almost succeeded, for death was old and tired. The weakness of death in this passage alarms him. Perhaps the priests, postulating all those millions of years in which they had existed, killed themselves with old age. Mr. Hart is not really an intelligent man. He does not at this point even guess the real reason for these expeditions into remote past time. The priests made calculations on their calendar dating back 400 million years. Why? Mr. Hart will find out in time. He will find out that death needs time. Death needs time like a junkie needs junk. And what does death need time for? The answer is so simple. Death needs time for what it kills to grow in, for our pook's sweet sake. You stupid, vulgar, greedy, ugly American death sucker. Like this. Death walks out into the field and kills the young corn god. The young corn god becomes a death seed from which another young corn god will grow. Birth and death in all its rich variety of an old outhouse. However, there is always more death than growth, even in the simplest terms of soil exhaustion. Every time you kill the young corn god, life goes out of him. The seed grows slower. The seed loses vitality. The corn god looks like a soulless zombie. And finally, the seed does not grow. No time for death. So death has to travel. Death takes the young corn god back to a time when he hasn't been hit so often he is punch drunk. Back to his youth. Back, back, back. Clickety, clickety, clack. Back to the Garden of Eden. Sure, death will burn that down too. The Mayan priests made these expeditions into past time because they had burned down present time. Mayan scholars have wondered why they did not make more calculations into future time. They were overdrawn, checks bounced, nothing and nobody there. Now, this did not happen right away. You don't get hooked on the first shot, and even when you are hooked, you can control it for a while, maybe stay on the same dose. But fix yourself on a junkie on heroin for several thousand years. Control that habit? So he goes back to the time when his habit was manageable. And when it gets out of hand, there he goes further back. Look at the Mayan pantheon and the calendar, and you will see that the Mayans, as experienced vampires and time junkies, were keenly aware of this impasse and took what precautions they could to avoid it by balancing the gods of life and death. Not as Mr. Hart's accounts are balanced on an either-or basis, but through a series of transitional shadings. In the transitional forms of death, death to some extent identifies with the man he kills and shares his death. Now this seems very subversive to Mr. Hart, who never identifies with his victim. To do so would put him in danger of becoming a victim himself. Yet at some point, death must take this risk. Death must become immortal and die in order to be reborn. Hart is not willing to take this risk. He wants to be death, but he will not know death. Death will not serve a stranger who cannot prove his title. A gringo who fears the very word and sets up a house rule that the word death may not be pronounced in his presence. Hart cannot read the Mayan books. He is reading them as one who reads Moby Dick to find out about whaling, and to hell with Captain Ahab and the white whale. What is written there, long dormant, is now a virulent strain of virus, waiting to escape, to leap from the pages and infect millions of human hosts. Not with Mr. Hart's greedy, Bible-belt, 19th century capitalistic message, but with their own messages, cruel, tender, ambiguous, shameless, slimy, virginal, capricious, immeasurably old and ravenously young. Itzamna, spirit of early mists and showers. Ixtab, goddess of ropes and snares. Ixchel, the spider web that catches the dew of morning. Zui Kak, virgin fire, patroness of infants. Atziz, the master of cold. Kaku Pocket, who works in fire. Ixtubtun, she who spits out precious stones. Hex Chun Chan, the dangerous one. Apuk, the destroyer. Look at these poisonous color maps where flesh trees grow from human sacrifice. Listen to these sniggering, half-heard words of tenderness and doom from lips spotted with decay. Mr. Hart, who would be death, does not know to whom he is a speak. He intends to occupy the space of Hunab Ku in the Mayan pantheon. Hunab Ku, the one divine. Of him no statue or picture was made, for he was incorporeal and invisible. He was, in short, the operator of the control machine, and in consequence did not include himself as data. However, having reprogrammed the machine to eliminate the troublesome good gods and those of ambiguous allegiance, Mr. Hart will soon encounter an acute time shortage. Death, now freed from all control, will use up all the time, and any control machine needs time. Yes, Mr. Hart, the Mayans ran it into the ground too, but they didn't do it as quick as you will, or cut themselves off with a habit as hoggish as yours. At this point, I put some questions to control. A word about this control. Some years ago in London, I contacted two computer programmers who purported to represent something that calls itself control, allegedly from the planet Venus. Control will answer any question for $1. You give your question to the programmers who feed it into a computer some way, and out comes the answer. So these are the actual questions that I sent in with my dollars, and the answers I got back from control. Whoever or whatever control may or may not be. Question. If control's control is absolute, why does control need to control? Answer. Control needs time. Exactly. Control needs time in which to exercise control, just as death needs time in which to kill. If death killed everyone at birth, or control installed electrodes in their brains at birth, there would be no time left in which to kill or control. Question. Is control controlled by its need to control? Answer, yes. Question. Why does control need humans, as you call them? Your knowledge of the local dialects leaves literacy to be desired. Answer, wait. Wait. Time, a landing field. The Mayans understood this very well. Mr. Hart does not. He thinks in terms of losers and winners. He will be a winner. He will take it all. Last take, Mr. Hart's deserted, ruined mansion, graffiti on the walls. Apuk was here. Here lived a stupid, vulgar son of a bitch who thought he could hire death as a company cop. This reading is from a novel in progress entitled Cities of the Red Night. And this passage concerns a virus which occasions biologic alterations in those who survive, and these alterations are genetically conveyed, giving rise to a race of mutants known as the fever freaks. Some of these mutations are favorable and some otherwise. A top government official bluntly warned, Virus B23, now loose in our overcrowded cities, is an agent that produces biologic changes in those affected, fatal in many cases, permanent and hereditary in those who survive and become carriers for that strain, which, as a matter of survival, they will spread as far and fast as possible to destroy enemies and quite literally make friends. Junkies, however, are only lightly affected by the virus and remain characteristically unchanged. Virus B23. Dr. Pearson was a discreet addict who kept himself down to 3 shots a day. Half a grain in each shot, he could always cover for that. Towards the end of an 8-hour shift, he tended to be perfunctory. So when he got the call from emergency, he hoped it wouldn't take long or keep him overtime. Of course, he could always slip a half grain under his tongue, but that was wasteful. And he liked to be in bed when he took his shot and feel it hit the back of his neck and move down the backs of his thighs while he blew cigarette smoke towards the ceiling. As he reached for his bag, he noticed that he had barked his knuckles. He couldn't remember where or when. That happens when you are feeling no pain. "It looks like measles, doctor." The doctor looked at the boy's face with distaste. He disliked children, adolescents, and animals. The word cute did not exist in his emotional vocabulary. There were red blotches on the boy's face, but they seemed rather large for measles. "Well, get it in here, nurse, whatever it is, away from the other patients. Not that I care what they catch, it's just hospital procedure." The boy was wheeled into a cubicle. Fingers cold with distaste, the doctor folded the sheet down to the boy's waist and noticed that he was wearing no shorts. "Why is he naked?" he snapped at the attendants. "Well, he was like that when they picked him up, doctor. Well, they might have put something on him." He turned back to the attendants. "What are you standing there for? Get out. And you, nurse, what are you gawking at? Order a bed in isolation." His temper was always evil when he ran over like this, but right after a shot, he could be nice in a dead, fishy way. The doctor turned back to the boy on the bed. His duty as a physician is clear. Hippocrates points sternly to the sheet. "Well, I suppose I have to look at the little naked beast." He folded the sheet down to the boy's knees. The boy had an erection. The genitals and the area adjacent to the genitals were bright red, like a red bikini. The doctor leaped back as he would from a striking snake, but he was too late. A gob of semen hit the back of his hand right on the skin knuckles. He wiped it off with an exclamation of disgust. He recalled later that he felt a slight tingling sensation, which he didn't notice at the time. Being that disgusted with the human body, he wondered why he had chosen the medical profession. And this dirty child was delaying his fix. "You filthy little beast," he snapped. The boy sniggered. The doctor pulled the sheet up to the boy's chin. He was washing his hands when the nurse came in with a stretcher table and an orderly to take the boy to isolation. The doctor sniffed. "My God, what's that smell?" "I don't know what this is, nurse, but it's rather disgusting." He seems to be in some state of sexual delirium. He also seems to be giving out a horrible odor. Order the broad spectrum. Cortisone, of course. It may be an allergic condition. Red-haired animals are especially liable. And the usual antibiotics. If the sexual condition continues, do not hesitate to administer morphine. The doctor gasped and clasped a handkerchief in front of his mouth and nose. "Get it out of here." He always referred to a patient as the disease. "Do you have a typhoid bed in isolation?" "Not now, we don't." "Well, it can't stay here." He had barely settled in bed after his fix when the phone rang. It was the super. Seems we have an epidemic on our hands, Doctor. All staff report back to the hospital immediately. Could it be that dirty little boy, he thought, as he dressed and picked up his satchel and walked to the hospital. He saw there was a police line round the entrance. Oh, yes, Doctor, right over there for your mask. I'll help you put it on, Doctor. A brisk young girl in some sort of uniform rubbed her tits against him in a most offensive manner. And before she got the mask on, he smelled it and he knew. It was that dirty little boy. Inside was a scene from Dante. Stretchers side by side in the corridors, sperm all over the sheets, the walls, and the floor. Be careful, Doctor. A garrulous old nurse caught his arm in time. Just put one foot solidly in front of the other, Doctor. That's right. It's terrible, Doctor. The older patients are dying like flies. I don't want to hear any generalities, nurse. Take me to my ward. Well, Doctor, you can have the northeast wing if you want, right here. Every sort of copulation was going on in front of him. Every disgusting thing they could think of. Some of them had pillowcases and towels wrapped around each other's necks in some kind of awful contest. As some of these crazed patients seemed in danger of strangulation, he ordered attendants to restrain them, but no attendants were available. Well, we'll start with morphine and a curare derivative, nurse. Sorry, Doctor, the morphine stocks are exhausted on the older patients. They go into the most awful spasms at the end, Doctor. At this terrible pronouncement, the doctor turned pale as death. He slumped to the floor in a faint, his face covered with red blotches. By the time they got his clothes off, his body was also affected, and spontaneous orgasms were observed. Most distasteful thing I ever stand still for, he told himself later, but it's still an easy score. He recovered from the fever because of his addiction, and the word went out that junk was the only insurance against the fever. No stemming the black market, the government concedes and legalizes. Now begins a deadly war of extermination between the junkies and the fever freaks. Here's the old junkie CO taking the young lieutenant on his rounds. They're out there, son, he points beyond the barbed wire and gun turrets, waiting, watching, hatching every filthy thing in their diseased minds and bodies. They'll sell you red hots for junk, kill you in a nasty sex spasm. They want a fever world. That's what we have to deal with out here. Well, perhaps sometime, somewhere, the human race will remember that a few white men stood between them and the fever freaks. What an old windbag, the boy thought. Where is my fix? We're on short rations here, son. Quarter G 3 times a day. Captain, that is short. We have to ration it, son. God help us if we ever run out and fall into their hands. Swear you'll kill me first, sir. Of course, son. The Army always takes care of its own. The hipster bebop junkies never showed at 103rd Street. The 103rd Street boys were all old-timers, thin, sallow faces, bitter, twisted mouths, stiff-fingered, stylized gestures. There's a junk gesture that marks the junkie like the limp wrist marks the fag. The hand swings out from the elbow, stiff-fingered, palm up. They were of various nationalities and physical types, but they all looked alike somehow. They all looked like junk. There was Irish, George the Greek, Pen upon Rose, Louis the bellhop, Eric the fag, the beagle, the sailor, and Joe the Mex. Several of them are dead now. Others are doing time. There are no more junkies at 103rd and Broadway waiting for the connection. The connection has gone somewhere else, but the feel of junk is still there. It hits you at the corner, follows you along the block, then falls away like a discouraged panhandler as you walk on. Joe the Mex had a thin face with a long, sharp, twitchy nose and a down-curving, toothless mouth. Joe's face was lined and ravaged, but not old. Things had happened to his face, but Joe was not touched. His eyes were bright and young. There was a gentleness about him, common to many old-time junkies. You could spot Joe blocks away. In the anonymous city crowd, he stood out sharp and clear, as though you were seeing him through binoculars. He was a liar, and like most liars, he was constantly changing his stories, altering time and personnel from one telling to the next. One time he would tell a story about some friend. Next time he would switch the story around to give himself the lead. He would sit in the cafeteria over coffee and pound cake, talking at random about his experiences. We knew this Chinaman has some stuff stashed, and we try every way to make him tell us where it is. We have him tied to a chair. I light matches. He made a gesture of lighting a match, and put them under his feet. He won't say nothing. I feel so sorry for that man. Then my partner hit him in the face with his gun, and the blood ran all down his face. He put his hands over his face and drew them down to indicate the flow of blood. When I see that, I turn sick at my stomach, and I say, let's get out of here and leave the man alone. He ain't going to tell us nothing. Louis was a shoplifter who had lost what nerve he ever had. He wore a long, shabby, black overcoat that gave him the look of a furtive buzzard. Thief and junkie stuck out all over him. Louis had a hard time making it. I heard that at one time he had been a stool pigeon, but the time I knew him, he was generally considered right. George the Greek did not like Louis and said he was just a bum. Don't ever invite him to your home. He'll take advantage. He'll go on the nod in front of your family. He's got no class to him. George the Greek was the admitted arbiter of this set. He decided who was right and who was wrong. George prided himself on his integrity. I never beat nobody. George was a 3-time loser. The next time meant life as an habitual criminal. So his life narrowed down to the necessity of avoiding any serious involvements. No pushing, no stealing. He worked from time to time on the docks. He was hemmed in on every side, and there was no way for him to go but down. When he couldn't get junk, which was about half the time, he drank and took goofballs. He had 2 adolescent sons who gave him a lot of trouble. George was half sick most of the time in this period of scarcity, and no match for these young louts. His face bore the marks of a constant losing fight. The last time I was in New York, I couldn't find George. The 103rd Street boys are scattered now, and no one I talked to knew what happened to George the Greek. Fritz, the janitor, was a pale, thin little man who gave the impression of being crippled. He was on parole after doing 5 years because he scored for a pigeon. The pigeon was hard up for someone to turn in, and the narcotics agent urgently needed to make an arrest. Between them, they built Fritz up to a big-time dope peddler and smashed a narcotics ring with his arrest. Fritz was glad to attract so much attention, and he talked complacently about his nickel in Lexington. The fag was a brilliantly successful lush worker. His scores were fabulous. He was the man who gets to a lush first. Never the man who arrives on the scene when the lush is lying there with his pockets turned inside out. A sleeping lush, known as a flop in the trade, attracts a hierarchy of scavengers. First come the top lush workers like the fag, guided by a special radar. They only want cash, good rings, and watches. Then come the punks who will steal anything. They take the hat, shoes, and belt. Finally, brazen, clumsy thieves will try to pull the lush's overcoat or jacket off him. The fag was always first on a good lush. One time he scored for $1,000 at the 103rd Street station. Often his scores ran into the hundreds. If the lush woke up, he would simper and feel the man's thigh as though his intentions were sexual. From this trick, he got his moniker. He always dressed well, usually in a tweed sports coat and gray flannels. A European charm of manner and a slight Scandinavian accent completed his front. No one could have looked less like a lush roller. He always worked alone. His luck was good, and he was determined to avoid contamination. Sometimes contact with the lucky can change a man's run of bad luck, but generally it works the other way. Junkies are an envious lot. 103rd Street envied the fag his scores, but everyone had to admit he was a right guy and always good for a small touch. Swim naked lunch. I can feel the heat closing in, feel them out there making their moves, setting up their devil doll stool pigeons. Crooning over my spoon and dropper I throw away at Washington Square Station. Vault a turnstile and 2 flights down the iron stairs, catch an uptown A train. Young, good-looking, crew-cut, Ivy League advertising exec type fruit holds the door back for me. I'm evidently his idea of a character. You know the type, comes on with bartenders and cab drivers talking about right hooks and call the counterman in Needix by his first name. A real asshole. And right on time, this narcotics dick in a white trench coat. Imagine tailing somebody in a white trench coat, trying to pass as a fag, I guess, hit the platform. I can hear the way he would say it, holding my outfit in his left hand, right hand on his piece. I think you dropped something, fella. But the subway is moving. So long, Flatfoot, I yell, giving the fruit his B production. I look into the fruit's eyes, take in the white teeth, the Florida tan, the $200 sharkskin suit, the button-down Brooks Brothers shirt, and carrying the news as a prop. The only thing I read is Little Abner. A square wants to come on hip, talks about pot, and smoke it now and then, keep some around to offer the fast Hollywood types. Thanks, kid, I say. I can see you're one of our own. His face lights up like a pinball machine with stupid pink affect. Grassed on me, he did, I said morosely. I drew closer and laid my dirty, junky fingers on his sharkskin sleeve. And us blood brothers in the same dirty needle. I can tell you in confidence he is due for a hot shot. This is a cap of poison junk sold to an addict for liquidation purposes, often given to informers. Usually the hot shot is strychnine since it tastes and looks like junk. You ever see a hot shot hit, kid? I saw the Gimp catch one in Philly. We rigged his room with a one-way whorehouse mirror and charged a Sosky to watch it. He never got the needle out of his arm. They don't if the shot is right. That's the way they find them, dropper full of clotted blood hanging out of a blue arm. The look in his eyes when it hit, kid, it was tasty. Recollect when I'm traveling with a vigilante, best shake man in the industry, out in Chi. We was working the fags in Lincoln Park. So one night the vigilante turns up for work in cowboy boots and a black vest with a hunk of tin on it and a lariat slung over his shoulder. So I says, "What's with you? You wig already?" He just looks at me and says, "Feel your hands, stranger." and hauls out an old rusty six-shooter, and I take off across Lincoln Park, bullets cutting all around me. And he hangs 3 fags before the fuzz nail him. I mean, the vigilante earned his moniker. You ever notice how many expressions carry over from queers to con men, like raise, letting someone know you're in the same line? Get her. Get the paregoric kid giving that mark the build-up. Eager Beaver would him much too fast. The shoe store kid, he got that moniker shaking down fetishes in shoe stores, says, give it to a mark with KY and he will come back moaning for more. And when that kid spots a mark, he begins to breathe heavy. His face swells and his lips turn purple like an Eskimo in heat. Then slow, slow, he comes on the mark, feeling for him, palpating him with fingers of rotten ectoplasm. And the fruit is thinking, what a character. Wait till I tell the boys in Clark's about this one. He's a character collector would stand still for Joe Gould's Seagull Act. So I put it on him for a Susky and made him meet to sell him some pot, as he calls it, thinking I'll catnip the jerk. Well, I said, tapping my arm, duty calls, as one judge said to another, be just, and if you can't be just, be arbitrary. I cut into the automat, and there is Bill Gaines, huddled in someone else's overcoat, looking like a 1910 banker with paresis. And old Bart, shabby and inconspicuous, dunking pound cake with his dirty fingers shiny over the dirt. I had some uptown customers Bill took care of, and Bart knew a few old relics from hot smoking times. Spectral janitors gray as ashes, phantom porters sweeping out dusty halls with a slow old man's hand, coughing and spitting in the junk-sick dawn. Retired asthmatic fences in theatrical hotels, Petapon Rose, the old madam from Peoria, stoical Chinese waiters never show sickness. Bart sought them out with his old junkie walk, patient and cautious and slow. Dropped into their bloodless hands a few hours of warmth. I made the round with him once for kicks. You know how old people lose all shame about eating and it makes you puke to watch them? Old junkies are the same about junk. They gibber and squeal at sight of it. The spit hangs off their chin, their stomach rumbles, and all their guts grind in peristalsis while they cook up, dissolving the body's decent skin. You expect any moment a great blob of protoplasm will flop right out and surround the junk. Really disgust you to see it. Well, my boys will be like that one day, I thought, philosophically. Isn't life peculiar? In Mexico, the gimmick is to find a local junkie with a government script whereby they are allowed a certain quantity every month. Our man was old Ike, who had spent most of his life in the States. I was traveling with Irene Kelly, and her was a sporting woman. In Butte, state of Montana, she gets the coke cars and runs through the hotel screaming Chinese coppers chase her with meat cleavers. I knew this cop in Chicago sniffed coke, used to come in form of crystals, blue crystals. So he go nuts and starts screaming the Federals is after him and run down this alley and stick his head in the garbage can. And I said, what you think you are doing? And he say, get away or I shoot you. I got myself hid good. We are getting some sea on our exit this time. Shoot it in the main line, son. You can smell it going in, clean and cold in your nose and throat. Then a rush of pure pleasure right through the brain, lighting up those sea connections. Your head shatters in white explosions. 10 minutes later, you want another shot. You'll walk across town for another shot. But if you can't score for C, you eat, sleep, and forget about it. Now, this is a yen of the brain alone, a need without feeling and without body. Earthbound ghost need, rancid ectoplasm swept out by an old junkie, coughing and spitting in the sick morning. One morning you wake up and take a speedball and feel bugs under your skin. 1890 cops with black mustaches block the doors and lean in through the windows, snarling their lips back from blue and gold embossed badges. Junkies march through the room singing the Muslim funeral song. Bear the body of Bill Gaines, stigmata of his needle wounds glow with a soft blue flame. Purposeful, schizophrenic detectives sniff at your chamber pot. It's the coke horrors. Sit back and play it cool, and shoot in plenty of that GIM. Day of the Dead, I got the chucks and ate my little Willie's sugar skull. He cried, and I had to go out for another. Walked past the cocktail lounge where they blasted the highlight bookie. The lavatory's been locked for 3 hours solid. I think they're using it for an operating room. Nurse, I can't find her pulse, doctor. Dr. Benway. Maybe she got it up her snatch in a finger stall. Nurse. Adrenaline, doctor? Dr. Benway. The night porter shot it all up for kicks. He looks around and picks up one of those rubber vacuum caps at the end of a stick they use to unstop toilets. He advances on the patient. Make an incision, Dr. Limp, he says to his appalled assistant. I'm going to massage the heart. Dr. Limp shrugs and begins the incision. Dr. Benway washes the suction cup by swishing it around in the toilet bowl. Shouldn't it be sterilized, doctor? Very likely, but there's no time. He sits on the suction cup like a cane seat, watching his assistant make the incision. You young squirts couldn't lance a pimple without an electric vibrating scalpel with automatic drain and suture. Soon we'll be operating by remote control on patients we never see. We'll be nothing but button pushers. All the skill is going out of surgery, all the know-how and make-do. Did I ever tell you about the time I performed an appendectomy with a rusty sardine can? And once I was caught short without instrument one and removed an uterine tumor with my teeth. That was in the upper effendi, and besides, the incision is ready, doctor. Dr. Benway forces the cup into the incision and works it up and down. Blood spurts all over the doctors, the nurse, and the wall. The cup makes a horrible sucking sound. I think she's gone, doctor. Well, it's all a day's work. He walks across the room to a medicine cabinet. Some fucking drug addict has cut my cocaine with Santa Flush. Nurse, send the boy out to fill this RX on the double. Dr. Benway is operating in an auditorium filled with students. Now, boys, you won't see this operation performed very often. There's a reason for that. You see, it has absolutely no medical value. No one knows what the purpose of it originally was, or if it had a purpose at all. Personally, I think it was a pure artistic creation from the beginning. Just as a bullfighter with his skill and knowledge extricates himself from danger, he has himself invoked, so in this operation, the surgeon deliberately endangers his patient, and then, with incredible speed and celerity, rescues him from death at the last possible split second. Did you ever see Dr. Tetrazzini perform? I say perform advisedly, because his operations were performances. He would start by throwing a scalpel across the room into the patient, and then make his entrance like a ballet dancer. His speed was incredible. I don't give them time to die, he would say. Tumors put him in a frenzy of rage. Fucking undisciplined cells, he would snarl, advancing on the tumor like a knife fighter. A young man leaps down into the operating theater and, whipping out a scalpel, advances on the patient. And espontaneo, stop him before he guts my patient. Espontaneo is a bullfighting term for a member of the audience who leaps down into the ring, pulls out a concealed cape, and attempts a few passes with the bull before he's dragged out of the ring. The orderly scuffle with the espontaneo was finally ejected from the hall. The anesthetist takes advantage of the confusion to pry a large gold filling from the patient's mouth. Pat's Terminal has organized a purple-ass baboon stick for motorcycles. The huntsmen have gathered for the hunt breakfast in the Swarm Bar, a hangout for elegant pansies. The huntsmen strut about with imbecile narcissism in black leather jackets and studded belts, flexing their muscles for the fags to feel. They all wear enormous falsy baskets. Every now and then one of them throws a fag to the floor and pisses on him. They are drinking victory punch, compounded of paregoric, Spanish fly, heavy black rum, Napoleon brandy, and canned heat. The punch is served from a great hollow gold baboon, crouched in snarling terror, snapping at a spear in his side. You twist the baboon's balls and punch runs out his cock. From time to time, hot hors d'oeuvres pop out the baboon's ass with a loud farting noise. When this happens, the huntsmen roar with bestial laughter and the fags shriek and twitch. Master of the hunt is Captain Everhard, who was drummed out of the Queen's 69th for palming a jockstrap in a game of strip poker. Motorcycles careening, jumping, overturning, spitting, shrieking, shitting baboons fighting hand to hand with the huntsman. Riderless cycles scrabbling about in the dust like crippled insects attacking baboon and huntsman. The party leader rides in triumph through yipping crowds. A dignified old man shits at sight of him and tries to sacrifice himself under the wheels of the car. Party leader: don't sacrifice your old dried-up person under the wheels of my brand-new Buick Roadmaster convertible with white-walled tires, hydraulic windows, and all the trimmings. It's a chip Arab trick. Look to thy accent, Ivan. Save it for fertilizer. We refer you to the Conservation Department to consummate your swell purpose. Hassan is a notorious liquefactionist and suspected to be a secret sender. Shucks, boys, he says with a disarming grin, I'm just a bloomin' old cancer and I gotta proliferate. He picks up a Texas accent associating with Dry-Hole Dutton, the Dallas Wildcatter, and he wears cowboy boots and a 10-gallon hat at all times, indoors and out. His eyes are invisible behind black glasses, his face smooth and blank as wax above a well-cut suit made entirely from immature, high-denomination banknotes. Banknotes are, in fact, currency, but they must mature before they can be negotiated. They keep hatching out all over me, he says shyly. It's like, gee, I don't know how to say it. It's like I was a mummy scorpion carrying those little baby notes around on my warm body and feeling them grow. Gosh, I hope I don't bore you with all this. Salvador, known as Sally to his friends, he always keeps a few friends around and pays them by the hour, got cured in the slunk business in World War II. The Pure Food and Drug Department have his picture in their files, a heavy-faced man with an embalmed look, as if paraffin had been injected under the skin, which is smooth, shiny, and poreless. One eye is dead gray color, round as a marble with flaws and opaque spots. The other is black and shiny, an old, undreaming insect eye. His eyes are normally invisible behind black glasses. He looks sinister and enigmatic. His gestures and mannerisms are not yet comprehensible, like the secret police of a larval state. In moments of excitement, Salvador is apt to lapse into broken English. His accent at such moments suggests an Italian origin. He reads and speaks Etruscan. A squad of accountant investigators have made a life work of Sal's international dossier. His operations extend through the world in an inextricable, shifting web of subsidiaries, front companies, and aliases. He has held 23 passports and been deported 49 times. Deportation proceedings pending in Cuba, Pakistan, Hong Kong, and Yokohama. Salvador Hassan O'Leary, alias the Shoe Store Kid, alias Wrong Way Marv, alias Afterbirth Leary, alias Slunky Pete, alias Placenta Juan, alias K.Y. Ahmed, alias El Chinche, alias El Culito, for 15 solid pages of dossier, first tangled with the law in New York City. where he was traveling with a character known to the Brooklyn police as Blubber Wilson, who hustled his goofball money shaking down fetishists in shoe stores. Husson was charged with third-degree extortion and conspiracy to impersonate a police officer. He had learned the shake man's #1 rule, DT, ditch tin, which corresponds to the pilot's KFS, keep flying speed. As the vigilante puts it, if you get a rumble, kid, ditch your piece of tin if you have to swallow it. So they didn't bust him with a queer badge. Husson testified against Wilson, who drew pen and deaf. Husson's case was noli prost. I'd have drawn a nickel, Husson said, if I hadn't met a decent cop. Husson met a decent cop every time he took a fall. His dossier contains 3 pages of monikers indicating his proclivity for cooperating with the law, playing ball, the cops call it. Others call it something else. Abe the Fuzz Lover, Finky Marv, the Crooning Hebe, Ollie the Stool, Wrong-O Sal, the Wailing Spick, the Sheeny Soprano, the Bronx Opera House, the Copper's Gin, the Answering Service, the Squeaking Syrian, the Cooing Cocksucker, the Musical Fruit, the Wrong Asshole, the Fairy Fink, Leary the Narc, the Lilting Leprechaun, Grassy Gert. He opened a sex shop in Yokohama, pushed junk in Beirut, pimped in Panama. During World War II, he shifted into high, took over a dairy in Holland and cut the butter with used axle grease, cornered the KY market in North Africa, and finally hit the jackpot with slunks. He prospered and proliferated, flooding the world with cut medicines and cheap counterfeit goods of every variety. Adulterated shark repellent, cut antibiotics, condemned parachutes, stale anti-venom, inactive serums and vaccines, leaking lifeboats. He prospered and proliferated, flooding the world with cut medicines and cheap counterfeit goods of every variety. Adulterated shark repellent, cut antibiotics, condemned parachutes, stale anti-venom, inactive serums and vaccines, leaking lifeboats. One more short piece. This is also from Exterminator. It's called From Here to Eternity. Mildred Pierce reporting. I was there, I saw it. I saw women thrown down on Fifth Avenue and raped in their mink coats by blacks and whites and yellows while street urchins stripped the rings from their fingers. A young officer stood nearby. Aren't you going to do something? I demanded. He looked at me and yawned. I found Colonel Bradshaw bivouacking in the Ritz. I told him bluntly what was going on. His eyes glinted shamelessly as he said, well, you have to take a broad general view of things. And that's what I have been doing, taking a broad general view of American troops raping and murdering helpless civilians, while American officers stand around and yawn. Been at it a long time, lady. It's the old Army game, from here to eternity. This license was dictated by considerations taken into account by prudent commanders throughout history. It pays to pay the boys off. Even the noble Brutus did it. Points with his left hand in catatonic limestone. The town is yours, soldier brave. Tacitus describes a typical scene. If a woman or a good-looking boy fell into their hands, they were torn to pieces in the struggle for possession, and the survivors were left to cut each other's throats. Mother-loving American army run by old women Many of them are religious, my God, hanging American soldiers for raping and murdering civilians. Old Sarge bellows from here to eternity. What the bloody fucking hell are civilians for? Soldiers pay. The CO stands there and smiles. Just ahead is a middle western town on a river. 30,000 civilians. The CO points. It's all yours, boys, every man, woman, and child. God is nigh. Let's get us some civvies. Now, just a minute, boys. Listen to old Sarge. Why make the usual stupid scene, kicking in liquor stores, grabbing anything in sight? You wake up hungover in an alley, you're prick sore from fucking dry cunts and assholes. Your eye gouged out by a broken beer bottle. Yeah, you and your asshole buddy wanted the same piece of ass. No fun in that. Why not leave it like this? They go about their daily routines, business as usual, schools all open. You see what I mean? And we just take what we want when we want it. Cool and steady and easy, and make them like it. The young lieutenant from camouflage sees what he means. Boys, swimming pools and locker rooms full of them. Getting it steady year after year. Now that's what I call pay.